Long before the pyramids pierced the Egyptian sky, a king ruled whose life was nearly swallowed by time itself. This is the story of Adjib, a forgotten pharaoh from the dawn of civilization, around 2771 BCE, in a land still learning how to be a nation. King Adjib inherited a fragile kingdom carved from desert and river. Egypt was young then. The idea of a pharaoh, a divine king, was still being invented. To rule wasn't just to command armies, it was to define what it even meant to be a king. The early dynasties were obsessed with maintaining order, what the Egyptians called the cosmic balance between chaos and harmony. If the Nile floods failed or the borders collapsed, the pharaoh would be blamed. Adjib ruled under this relentless pressure, where success meant stability and failure could echo into eternity. What we know of him comes not from grand chronicles, but from scattered clues etched into stone and ivory. Tiny labels once tied to jars of oil, seal impressions stamped on clay. Fragments of inscriptions, these are the whispers of his name across 5 millennia. Some call him Adjib. The confusion itself reminds us how easily a king can slide into obscurity. He ruled for a short time, perhaps only a decade, but even in that brief span, he left marks that still puzzle Egyptologists today. One of the greatest mysteries is his royal title. In some inscriptions, he uses a phrase traditionally reserved for another ruler. Was this a sign of political rivalry? A power struggle simmering beneath the surface of the early state? To understand why this mattered, you have to imagine the royal court. Advisors gathered in mud brick halls, scribes scratched hieroglyphs onto tablets, and priests interpreted omens. Everything revolved around the king, believed to be the link between humans and gods. If Adjib's authority was questioned, the entire cosmic order could seem at risk. Beyond the palace, life flowed with the rhythm of the Nile. Farmers worked fields fertilized by the annual flood, and fishing boats drifted on the brown water. The state depended on this rhythm, and the king depended on the state. Any disruption, drought, rebellion, or administrative failure could fracture the unity so painstakingly assembled by his predecessors. Archaeologists trace Adjib's reign to his tomb at Abydos, the sacred necropolis of Egypt's first rulers. Compared to the later pyramids, his grave was modest, a subterranean chamber surrounded by smaller burials. These surrounding graves open a dark window into early royal ideology. They held the bodies of retainers, servants, officials, or courtiers interred at the same time as the king, suggesting that loyalty was expected to extend beyond death. This chilling ritual of human sacrifice would soon vanish, replaced by symbolic statues instead of human lives. Inside the tomb, looters in time left little behind, but the layout itself speaks volumes. Storage chambers were filled with provisions for eternity. Jars of food, oil, and beer, sealed with the king's name, all for his journey into the next world. Even in obscurity, Adjib was preparing for immortality. But immortality was not guaranteed. Later king lists include him, but with ambiguity. Some seal impressions suggest that officials loyal to his successor began overwriting his memory, literally stamping new names over old ones. In ancient Egypt, erasing a name was a terrifying act, a threat to the soul itself. Was Adjib a victim of a political plot after his death? His legacy quietly his successor, Samarkand, left inscriptions that hint at a crisis, famine, disease, or internal disorder. These troubles may have begun during Adjib's reign, a sign that the delicate early state was under strain. Yet, it would be wrong to see him only as a fragile king. During his time, Egypt continued to function. Trade routes stretched across the Sinai Peninsula into Canaan, bringing in copper, resins, and timber. The machinery of the state did not collapse. In an era when everything was an experiment, simple survival was a major achievement. Religion was also evolving rapidly. Gods were being standardized, temples formalized, and festivals codified. Adjib stood at the center of this sacred world, performing ceremonies meant to renew creation. The imagery carved for him includes the Sarika Palace facade, topped by the falcon god, Horus proclaiming him the living embodiment of divine authority. These symbols were powerful statements. To obey the king was to obey the cosmos, but behind the divine imagery was a mortal man navigating court factions and succession disputes. The first dynasty hadn't yet perfected the smooth transfer of power, and Adjib's short reign suggests these tensions shadowed him from the start. When he died, the machinery of royal burial roared to life. Priests prepared his body with early embalming techniques. Processions wound through the desert necropolis. The king disappeared beneath the sand, joining the ancestors who watched over the living. Centuries later, scribes would record his name in red and black ink. Millennia after that, archaeologists would rediscover him, piecing together a biography from the debris of a long-dead court. Adjib's story forces us to ask how history is made and unmade. Some rulers leave pyramids, others leave only a few inscriptions and a contested legacy. Yet without kings like Adjib, the grand power of later Egypt could never have emerged. He ruled during the fragile childhood of a civilization that would grow into a giant. His importance lies not in monuments, but in momentum. He was one link in the experimental chain of early pharaohs who tested what kingship could be and how a state might endure. Today, as scholars debate his titles and re-examine seal impressions, Adjib continues to speak across time, not with certainty, but with mystery. His reign reminds us that history isn't only built by the famous, but also by those whose footprints are faint, whose stories must be coaxed from dust, grain by grain. Standing on the desert plateau at Abydos, one can almost sense the presence of that forgotten king. He did not build pyramids or leave colossal statues, but he helped hold together a newborn nation at the edge of chaos and order. In that fragile, formative age, under the blazing Egyptian sun, King Adjib ruled briefly, mysteriously, and just long enough to leave a shadow that still stretches across 5,000 years. Thanks for watching. If you're fascinated by the hidden stories of the ancient world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more journeys into the past.